Hey everybody, this is Randall Beach, creator of drummingexpert.com and author of the book Hold On to Your Sticks: Mastering the Secrets of World-Class Drumming. Welcome to video number 3 in my series about the 3 most powerful techniques of world-class drummers. Now, in this third video, I want to talk to you about what does it really take to win. And I'm going to share this third technique with you, this powerful technique of world-class drummers. And in the context of that and the previous 2 videos, the first video was about 2-height drumming, getting control over taps and accents. The second video was about double strokes, working our way to a double stroke roll. And this third video, the technique we're going to discuss is the flam. It's quickly becoming a lost art, in my opinion. And we're going to go through that in detail, and I'm going to talk to you about flams. But before I do that, I want you to think about what does it take to really succeed at this endeavor of becoming a great drummer. And when I think about that, it's like, I think the principle that is probably the most important in my mind, there's a lot of things that we have to do to be a great drummer, but the foundational principle to begin with, I believe, is this: drumming is a mastery of motions. And sometimes people call them strokes, but you have to move your hands, hold your hands, use your wrist, use your fingers, move the sticks in a certain way. It's motion, and there's a right way to move your sticks and there's a wrong way to move your sticks. And mastering all the correct motions is the secret to becoming a great drummer, that foundational first thing that you've got to work on. So I like to think of all the details associated with these motions fall into different categories. And I remember vividly, I was back, maybe 20 years ago. I was well into drumming. I was a pretty good drummer, I thought. I could play all the rudiments. I had some chops. And I remember reading an article by this great legendary jazz drummer. And I have to be honest with you, so long ago, I'm not positive who it was. I think it was Philly Joe Jones. That's what I'm remembering. And he said in this article, he said, all these rudiments people talk about, there's really only 3 rudiments: the single stroke roll, the double stroke roll, and the flam. And that kind of stopped me, and it changed my thinking, and I thought, man, that's so simple. It's so simple. Here I've studied to be able to play all these rudiments and all these hybrid rudiments, and I could play a lot of stuff. And then he's just like, there's really only 3. And it made me stop and think about that. He was right. And from that moment forward, it changed my thinking about drumming. And I started to look at these 3 different rudiments and how they showed up in drumming and how everything in drumming fit into these 3 rudiments. And my book, Hold On to Your Sticks, this is exactly how it is laid out. And it's become the framework, if you will, for how I teach drumming and how I help students progress through all the levels of drumming so they can become truly a world-class drummer. And so these 3 areas are where you need to focus, and they become the catalyst for mastering the motions and for developing this vocabulary and ability to play so many different rudiments and figures and grooves and rhythms and all this kind of stuff so that you can express yourself really, really well on the drums. And to do all of this gives you chops, and you got to have chops. Now, I would like to cover this last secret, this last technique that I think is very powerful, and share some things with you about how to play flams properly and take you through a process that I use to help people master flams. Now, so let's do that right now. First of all, a flam is a drum rudiment that is composed of two different parts. There's a low tap stroke, and by the way, the technique for this stroke is exactly the same as what we talked about in the first video, that down-up dropping motion. That's called the grace note in the context of a flam. And when it's written in music, like I'll put a flam up here on the screen, you can see there's the little tiny grace note. The little note's called the grace note. You use a tap stroke to play it. And then the main accent stroke is called the principal stroke. And when you play these together, the grace note comes in slightly before the main principal stroke, and it creates this chut sound. All right. Now, that seems like a pretty simple thing, but it amazes me how many people really can't play flams and they never really learn the coordination between their sticks, between their hands to make the flam sound great. If the grace note comes in too soon and the two notes are separated too much, you have what's called a very open flam. Not the sound of a traditional flam. And then sometimes people mess up the grace note and they get what's called a flat flam. I can hardly even do it. Well, like you really can't hear the grace note. Or they play backwards flams where the grace note's late. Anyways, all those contortions that's not what we want. We want the grace note to come in followed by the principal stroke, so you get this chut sound. That grace note activates the head, activates the snares, and then when that principal stroke comes in, it just expands the sound. And it's a really great sound. Very unique to drumming. And one that you should really be able to do very, very well. So I have something I call the 4 steps to a perfect flam. And if you have not been to my website, drummingexpert.com, and poked around on all the free lessons there, learnhowtoplaydrums.com, then you should check it out because there's some stroke development exercises that help you learn how to move your sticks. And I use some of those same motions to build this flam. So I'm not going to go into all of those, but I will explain the terminology that I'm using. So the first step, after you can play a grace note and a float stroke, which we talked about, then you got to start putting these together. And the first step is what I call snap stroke flam. And the right stick starts up in accent height, and the left stick starts down here. This is going to be the grace note, and this is the principal stroke. So you start here. Now, the way to play a perfect flam right from the beginning is with your sticks in this position, both sticks go down at the same time, and you get a flam. Now, this one just drops. This one the accent accelerates, and obviously this one's going to strike slightly before this one because it's so much closer to the head. But this relationship really should give you a good sounding flam. Chut. Listen to that sound. Pause here for a moment. Drop them. Now, the most common mistake in playing flams is lifting the grace note up. So someone might do this. Messes it all up. You can't lift. This only drops. Remember, that's the first rule of the tap stroke. Down up. Taps go down. You do not lift them. So you got to do that when you use the tap stroke to play the grace note in the flam. I'll do it a couple more times. All right? That's the basic flam. Now, that's not hard to do and it's not hard to understand, but you need to practice this a lot so that it becomes a habit. So when your brain thinks flam, your hands just do what it takes to play chut. If you've practiced your two-height drumming the way you need to, you should have really good control over grace note strokes, those tap strokes, which will help you not lift those. So make sure you've practiced that. So that's the first stroke, snap stroke flam. Next one is what I call switch stroke flam. We're going to do the same thing, but instead of stopping here, we're going to lift the grace note up to here. So it looks like this. Now, I want you to remember, if you think back to the first video, when we were building taps and accents, we did this motion. Down, up, a tap leading up to an accent. That's the same thing that's happening here. Chut. Now we're in position to do it on the other hand. Freeze for a moment. Think about it. Drop the sticks together. Freeze for a moment. Watch. Just drop that grace note. And you go slow. And the whole time you're going to maintain the control over the grace note and the principal stroke and get chut, chut, chut. Now I like to tell my students you need to do 1,000 of those of slow flams. Once you get this down, I really like to focus on the switch stroke because you get to practice both hands and you get to practice this continuous motion where you lift up to accent height. Once you've got this down, literally, do a couple of 1,000 of these. And after you've done that, it'll be like, I got it. That is a habit in my hands. I know what it means to play a flam. That's the second step. Third step, same thing, but don't stop in this position. Move continuously. Looks like this. So we just end up with alternating eighth note flams. Now I want you to notice the grace notes. If I take away one hand, lo and behold, this is what my hand is doing. This is just taps and accents. Right out of the first video. Drop, drop, drop. We do not lift the grace note. Each hand is doing that. If you do that motion correctly on each hand, and you've practiced overlapping the hands just right so that you get the correct flam sound, then it's not hard to get great sounding flams. Do a bunch of that. Just work on that over and over and over again. By the time you get to where you can do that, you're really getting the flam chut established into your hands in a very powerful way. Now, the next step, the last one, is quite a bit more difficult because we're going to start with both sticks down in rest position. And I call this float stroke flam. I talked about this float stroke motion, floating up and accelerating down. It's the motion we use to play an accent. Well, that's what we're going to do with the right hand, but we're going to drop in a grace note to create a flam. Now, the secret here is if I did this in slow motion, this stick's going up, that one, the grace note does not move. That has to stay in place. This stick's going up. Once this one reaches the top of the stroke, they come down together just like in the snap stroke flam. But it is so easy to do this. Game over. It's not going to work. You got to hold this one still and only drop it. Notice my left hand. Does it lift? No. It just waits till there and it goes down. Do that on the left. You got to go slow on that one. Oftentimes people have difficulty with that one. Now, you can go beyond that. It's nice once you get that going to try to play consecutive flams. We did consecutive flams alternating. Now do consecutive flams on one hand. This is really good practice. Do it on the left hand. Notice that down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up motion happening on the grace note. So those are just single flams, all one hand, alternating. I broke it down. That is a rudiment you really want to master because there are so many incredible things you can do with flams. And there's, if you look at any traditional rudiment list, there's all these different rudiments, flam accent and flam paradiddle and flamacue and flam taps and Swiss triplets. They're all so much fun to play. And they're not too tough to learn once you have a foundation of correct flams. But if someone can't keep their grace note down and drop it properly and get chut-chut every time, and they go on to try to play harder flams, it's a losing battle because they don't have the foundation of just a single flam. So take the time to learn how to play single flams, go through those 4 steps, and you'll have it. Now, another way that you can think about flams is if you just I'll demonstrate just a few of the basic flam rudiments so you can see how what we just did incorporates into more expanded flam rudiments. And one way to look at it is accent patterns, and you just add flams on the accents. For instance, if I just play accented triplets, well, if I just add a grace note to each of the accents, I end up with a rudiment called flam accent. There's that 2-height tap accent framework showing up again, and you want to be able to do that well. You can break it down very slow. All the taps here, all the accents here. It's really about mastering the motion of the taps and the accents and putting it all together and not letting anything else creep in on you. There's another rudiment, flam tap, which really is right, right, left, left, diddles. And then you put a flam on each of those. So you got that's a really fun rudiment. And there's a bunch more. Flam paradiddles, flamacues, like inverted flam taps are a blast. So check out all those Flam rudiments. Now, as I mentioned, uh, in my book, I'm going to be sending you another video, and in this next video, I'm going to show you and exactly what's in the book. And I'm going to take you through it in detail because I really believe that all the exercises in there are categorized in these three main areas, and it helps you develop your skills and your vocabulary through a series of instruction and illustrations and exercises and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to send you one more video and tell you all about that. But one other thing I did want to mention is I really want you to succeed at this, and I know you can. And I just know that there's a lot of people out there that could be, I know there's people out there in my experience that are thinking, I don't know if I can do this. Maybe you can do it, or maybe, Tommy Igoe can do it, or Steve Gadd can do it, but I don't think I can do it. Well, I want to tell you, you don't have to be some special, gifted person or whatever that has all this talent oozing out of you from birth to be able to do this. Most of us aren't that way. We just work hard at it, and you can work hard at it. You got to go slow and take your time and master the fundamentals and learn how to play each of the categories of drumming in a meticulous, precise way so you can gradually build up your skills and your speed and be a very, very functional, accomplished, world-class drummer. You can do it. One other thing that I think people often will say is that, well, I don't think this really applies to me. And sometimes people have weird perceptions about snare drumming and the rudiments and what some people will call rudimental drumming, that they think, well, this doesn't really apply to me. I'm a drum set player. I just want to be a rock and roll star. Well, I've got to tell you right now, drumming is a huge, there's so much breadth to the world of drumming, from all different cultures to different categories of drumming that are common here in the United States. But I know a lot of people are watching my videos and learning how to drum in other parts of the world. And everywhere you go, we find the art of drumming appearing in different ways. And if we really want to be accomplished drummers, we should have an open mind to all these different types of drumming. You learn so much from all these different types of cultures and the way they drum. And one thing that is very, very essential and true is that you have to have great basic fundamental skills to do anything in drumming. And the snare drum and a drum pad and being able to pick up your sticks and play basic fundamental rudiments and patterns. If people are hung up on the term rudiments, don't call it that. It's sticking patterns, it's rhythmical variations, whatever it is. It's a vocabulary that gives you a mastery over the language of drumming. And if you don't know how to do all of that stuff, you're really limiting yourself. If you're trying to play in some great drum line as a rudimental drummer in marching percussion, awesome, go for it. If you're a drum set player and you want to focus on rock, or you like jazz or Latin music or reggae or whatever it is that you're excited about, I'm telling you, you will become a great drummer if you master great fundamental skills with your hands. And when it comes time to playing with your feet, if you're going to be a drum set player of any type, if you've already got it in your head and your hands, putting it into your feet is just a matter of some more practice. It's not hard. If you can already do it and understand it, and you've got good tempo control and all that stuff, then adding your feet just takes some more practice. But you got to have great foundations. Now, one last thing that sometimes I hear from people is, well, I don't have a drum set. I don't have what I need to get started. Look, I'm telling you, you can start on this path with a simple pair of sticks and the simplest drum pad you can find. Man, you could drum on a tabletop if you had to. Get you a good pair of sticks and just start. And once you start to develop some skills and get some momentum behind you, getting more resources and tools will come much easier. If you're young and it's about getting mom and dad to get you a drum set, if you've got some chops and some skills and you've demonstrated that you know what you're doing, I think it's going to be a lot easier to get yourself a drum set and be able to go to the next level if that's your goal. So just don't give up and don't think you can't, because you can. I really believe you can. So practice your flams, practice the stuff I shared with you in the other videos. I look forward to sharing one more video with you and telling you more about my book, and I know you're going to love that. And just remember, music is the language of the human spirit, and drumming is the heartbeat of that language, and that's what we're about. So good luck.